Well, welcome to the Saturation Podcast, where we have discussions with church leaders about the life of faith and the mission of the church. My name is Levi Pancake. I serve as a local church pastor in Syracuse, New York, and I am recording another episode with, you ready for it? I'm going to throw out a definite article. The Jordan Stinziano.
That may be the case. I think I'm the only one.
I don't know about that. I don't know any others, but there's 8 billion people in the world. Maybe there's another Jordan Stinziano, who also serves with me as a pastor in Syracuse, New York as well. Today, we are going to focus on one of the characteristics we talk about with church leaders. There are 7 characteristics that we'll often walk with and through with church leaders. This is the 7th one. We haven't gone in order. It's all over the place. But it's an important one.
Which is so unlike you.
Well, you know.
You are so orderly.
I'm so go with the flow. I'm so
neat.
Casual. I'm
Oh, my goodness.
Spontaneous.
Yeah.
Anyway, this one is called, I think in our writings with Saturation Church Planting, I believe it's called global telescoping.
Yeah.
This is, well, I'll let you introduce the concept, what that means, because just when I say global telescoping, we sound like scientists or something like that, and scientists we are not. So, why don't you explain this characteristic?
The two of us are not.
No, we're not. Explain this characteristic, why it's important for a local church, and how this relates to a church actually being, I know it's a buzzword, but being missional and taking responsibility for, the task, the Great Commission.
Mm-hmm. Well, the simplest way to describe this is to think about the idea of a church mobilizing its people, right, in the life of faith, right, which we talked about with regard to growing them in the values that we've talked about, and then mobilizing its people in the mission of the church, right, when we talked about target-driven and circle of accountability. So a local church that's committed to those things is growing in those things, then thinking about the idea that God cares about 8 billion people. God cares about the whole world. Mm-hmm. So how do they then partner with another congregation somewhere else in the world, whether that's on the other side of their country that they live in, whether that's in another country in the same continent they live in, or maybe somewhere on the other side of the world. But they're going to partner with another congregation somewhere else in the world to help that congregation do the very same thing that they're trying to do, mobilize their people in the life of faith and in the mission of the church, right? So that's the idea that we're talking about, is really drawing as they've drawn a circle around 8 billion people, which we would encourage each congregation to do, that part of that is that they're going to intentionally partner with a congregation somewhere else in the world and hopefully create a reciprocal partnership where they're doing that together, helping each other in their own circles.
So you're saying a local church, there's, of course, we've talked about the spiritual responsibility they have for their town, village, city, community that they live in, mm-hmm. but also an indicator of a healthy church and a missional church is a local church also taking some degree of responsibility in another part of the world.
Another part of the world.
Now, often it's called church doing missions, global missions,
right.
which is related.
Right, sure. And I love to hear about churches that are engaged in mission work around the world. And every church should be in some form.
Yes.
Right? And so...
And we're advocating that. We're saying that.
Absolutely. Yep. What we're advocating, though, the slight shift is a lot of times local missions or local churches that are involved in global missions, they have a relationship with somebody, or they know somebody, or maybe their denomination has partnered with them with someone, and maybe they're writing a check, or maybe they actually send people to that place. But when they go to that place, the work that they do in that place doesn't look anything like the work that they do back home. It's
and you're not talking about contextualization or strategy. You're talking about principles and convictions.
Absolutely. And so what we're advocating is that the partners that you partner with have the same convictions that you have, so that if someone from your congregation were to go there, sure, there's going to be differences because you're in a different place and whatnot, but that they would recognize, this is the same heartbeat.
Okay.
This is the same, because they're committed to the same convictions and the same outcome that the congregation I'm a part of back home is committed to.
Yeah. So what we're advocating here, there's an intentionality
Mm-hmm.
and a focus.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a commitment to a global partnership. There's a commitment to global missions.
Mm-hmm.
But not that there's anything wrong with writing a check
No.
or supporting missionaries. We would advocate that. But wouldn't it be better if
It'd be sharper.
it'd be greater focus, greater intentionality,
Yeah.
if who you partnered with globally had a like-mindedness,
Yeah, if they mirrored.
if you had similar convictions,
Yeah.
and if you were able to get behind that work
Yep.
in greater ways, yes, financially,
Mm-hmm.
maybe, hopefully, but also in greater reciprocal partnership
Yeah.
Around the world.
Yeah. So, here in the U.S., that looks more like traditional missions as we would understand it.
Yep.
That you're sending teams or you're sending financial resources, things like that. But around the world, it may be that you've got guys in one state in a nation that are willing to engage in another state, or one nation that's then close to another nation, and they're willing to send guys to that nation, and it's a huge sacrifice to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But because they've drawn a circle around maybe their continent or maybe their subcontinent or whatever, and they're making investments in those things, and they can see some reciprocation, and it's a tremendous benefit to what's going on around the world. So it can look different depending on where you are and what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned those maybe in the United States where we are, other parts of the world. We recently found out 52% of those who are listening to this podcast are outside of the United States, which makes sense given the breadth and global scope
Yep.
of Saturation Church planning, and 62 nations we're involved with and have some activity and all of that. So, repeating for emphasis, but here in the United States, okay, a lot of financial support, maybe more traditional missions, but if a church leadership can bring greater intensity, intentionality, focus, that would be wonderful.
Right.
But you're saying this can also happen in other parts around the world I'm going to generalize. Yeah, well, I'm going to generalize, who are often on the receiving end of maybe a lot of Western funds, Western short-term teams, Western missionaries. And you're saying even for those expressions outside of the United States, they also
Absolutely
can globally telescope and be involved in other parts of their nation and other countries around the world.
Absolutely. So I got back from India the other day, and I was in Calcutta, and was with a group of guys from 8 different states, and we were talking about this very concept. And I was able to point to the individual who was hosting this particular event. He hadn't even put it together. One of the leaders that he had trained had put it together.
Okay.
But he had been the driving. He's one of our primary guys in the region of Southern Asia, and the congregation that he's a part of has sent him to other places, but has within the last 2 years begun sending him in partnership with a church in America to Russia. And so to say to these guys, as I'm introducing this concept, here's a guy in your midst whose congregation is begun to telescope into Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And they all look at him, right? And why would you do that? Well, he was able to say, because there's close to 200 million people in that nation, right? And the church needs to mobilize those people towards this outcome. And there's churches and church leaders that are hungry for that. And at this point in the time, when most people can't get in there, he as an Indian can, and he's willing to do it. And that church is able to wrap their arms around those leaders in Russia, right? And he's able to do that. And so it became a powerful story or a powerful anecdote for those other guys to think, like, because they weren't thinking that way. And even when I first started going overseas years ago, thinking about the reciprocal nature, right? I would always look for, and still do, what can I bring back? Like, what can I learn? And really, there's myriad things that I've learned over the years in various places that I've been that have influenced the congregation that we serve together, right? Strategies, ideas, evangelistic tools, all sorts of things that have influenced the congregation Missio that we serve together that I learned because of the work that I've been doing overseas. So I think there's these opportunities for reciprocation in telescoping. It's not just American go over.
Yep.
If that makes sense.
And I think there's so many benefits to this and so important. One of them that comes to mind is, in a word, perspective. From an individual level, pastorally, someone is going through trials, hardship, suffering, and they might need a lot of support and care. One of the pastoral exhortations we'll often give, in addition to other important things, but one of them is be involved in some type of biblical community, so that there's something about just not just reading the scriptures to address your particular hardship, struggle, trial, but just read the scriptures as they point to Jesus, God, and then engage the scriptures with other brothers and sisters. And then as you hear what's going on in their life, and you hear what challenges they're facing and things that they're asking you to pray for, it takes the focus off of themselves, and it allows them to focus on other people.
Yeah.
And there's something healthy about taking the focus off ourselves and redirecting it somewhere else. And I think the same thing with this global telescoping, where a church can be so preoccupied with itself.
Absolutely.
And be so burdened with its challenges as it tries to reach its own community, or all the pastoral challenges or whatever. And it allows them to just lift their eyes up a bit and see that our God is a global God, that people from every tribe, tongue, nation, people group, etc., will worship him. Absolutely. And then you see that God is honored and glorified in other contexts and places, becomes a really strengthening and helpful thing for a local church.
And the idea of forming long-standing relationship with, right? So that there are congregations I can walk into around the world where I'll see people and they'll see me, and it's like lifelong friends. So part of the idea of having that long-standing relationship and that investment in those places allows your congregation to build not just hey, we went to a place and came back and there was, but it's these are our brothers, these are our sisters, these are people we know, these are people we love and we care for. And allows there to be a depth of relationship with the global church, which isn't really that different from, once they get to know them, from their own congregation. Right. And they begin to own that. And so it gives an opportunity for the mobilization of your own congregation, even in that. And so, again, is it drastically different from the missions program in most congregations? It's a different focus, right?
Different emphasis.
And so if you've already, if a congregation that's listening, somebody's leading the congregation, they've already got some of those relationships out there. We wouldn't say you get rid of,
right?
But how do you begin to, with the partners that you already have, envision them towards this same outcome that we've been talking about, right? It's because you've already got a depth of relationship and partnership with people around the world. Great. How do you begin to envision them and train them? Help them think about the same things that you're trying to think about in your own circle of accountability.
Yeah, and evaluating partners around the world, figuring out, prioritizing where there is greater alignment. Again, not saying cut all the partners, whatever, but ideally, preferably,
right,
you're able to support in a myriad of ways those that are aligned with your theological convictions,
right,
aligned with your missiological convictions, aligned with, is that partner missionary, other church around the world, are they prioritizing the evangelization of their place? Are they mobilizing people in it? To evaluate that. And the greater alignment, the better. I think it's also important, if a church can, to do some short-term trips with those partners. It's really helpful for the discipleship of your people.
Absolutely.
Allowing the people from your church see another context, see another church, see them trying to implement the same kind of priorities and convictions in their place. It may not be the most helpful thing to our partner overseas, but it is certainly helpful for the spiritual formation of the people from your church.
Yeah, definitely. It is tremendous for the spiritual formation of the people in your congregation. And what you want to do as you send those people out is you definitely want to serve the partner. So you want to make sure that it's a partner that can receive that team, that it actually helps them and whatnot. And so long as it does that, then it is your team will probably receive greater benefit for that trip than the partner.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's great.
What about the church that doesn't have that many global partners, or their connection to other churches around the globe is solely through a larger denomination, and their partnership around the world is only sending money to the denomination, which again, not saying that should stop, but any advice that you would have for that church of how do we find such a partner? Where do we go? How do we figure that out? What could that look like?
Sure. Well, at the risk of my inbox getting flooded, I mean, we can connect people to like-minded men and women around the world, and are happy to do that. But I think part of it is, in the past, I've had to just go to places and work relationships I have, and begin to have conversation with churches. You begin to ask people that are in your congregations, do you know people that are out in the field? Do you have relationships around the world? And then you begin to broker relationships that way, begin to talk to people, and then begin to talk to them about what they're doing and how what they're doing intersects with what you're doing, so forth and so on. So there's a lot of ways to do that. It can be intimidating.
Yeah. Well, church leaders, they've already so many things on their plate. It's hard to think about another country. But I heard you say a couple things. SCPglobal.org, we can connect people to some wonderful partners. Ask people in your own church if they have connections. And then thirdly, people in your own area, other local churches, do they have missions partners that they're supporting that you can at least begin to evaluate?
Right.
Those are all ways that I think they can get some of this off the ground. And start somewhere.
Yeah, start somewhere.
You don't have to wait for the ideal.
Doesn't have
to
start
somewhere.
You start somewhere with anything. You start somewhere, and then you begin to shape it into the thing that you're hoping that it will become, and that takes time.
Yeah, and this becomes an important characteristic as we think about a healthy church or a missional church. And I'm glad that it's one of the 7 characteristics we talk about, because thinking about the world, the ends of the earth, people from every tribe, tongue, nation, worshiping Jesus, the task is not finished. And yes, we have a greater priority on the town, village, city, neighborhood where we live, yes. But we also have a responsibility to our region, to our state, to our nation, and also to the ends of the earth.
Right.
And so being involved to some degree in all of those spheres becomes a really, really healthy mark for a church.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for talking about telescoping global missions, and always appreciate our conversations.
Amen.
Thank you for listening to the Saturation Podcast, where we have discussions with church leaders about the life of faith and mission of the church. This podcast is produced by Saturation Church Planning. Saturation Church Planning exists to glorify God through partnering with church leaders in nations, regions, cities throughout the world towards the full evangelization of those places through the mobilization of the church. For more information, please visit scpglobal.org.